Well, welcome everyone to this edition of Conversations on Church Innovation. I'm Tim Nations with Leadership Network, and I'm joined today by Doug Walker, who is the senior pastor for Fellowship of the Parks Church in Keller, Texas. And today we're going to be talking about MultiSite and visiting with Doug on the things that they've done and the things that they've learned over the past several years as being a multi-site church. And so, Doug, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you, Tim, and Leadership Network.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, let's just start off by you giving us a little bit of your personal background. Tell us a little bit about Fellowship of the Parks and speak on your role as the leader of a growing multi-site church.
Okay. Well, our church is interesting in that I'm the founding pastor. I've been here 20 years, and our church started out not as a sort of mushroom type growth. As a matter of fact, we really struggled in the beginning. We started with basically 8 other adults and 1 infant in a life group. And so it took us about 3+ years to really get over about 60 people. So our story's been one of struggle and trying to make things work as we've gone. And we've been very committed to the overall vision of the church, but the strategy has changed throughout. My role as the leader in that, of course, being the founding pastor, I've always sort of set direction, maintained the vision, and tried to architect a cultural climate that would facilitate growth. So our church has unapologetically been focused on reaching just people that otherwise would be hard to reach. So we started out more as a, to use old terminology, well, I'll just say a seek church, combined also with elements in the service that we're believer enriching. We're committed to life groups as the discipleship or growing process of our people. And then it's continually been about involving our people in serving and expanding. So we've had multiple locations over the years. And then we started our first campus. As far as a physical building, us buying property and building back in 2001. We have then expanded to 3 campuses, really kind of 3.1. We have 3 campuses in the Metroplex. Our original campus, we call it our Keller campus, but it's North Fort Worth. We have one in the west part of North Tarrant County, and that is in Hazlet. And then we have one in, the Mid-Cities Grapevine area, which is east of our original campus. And then a couple years ago, due to our involvement really in a mission out in Cuesta, New Mexico, we took over the church there that used to be the First Baptist Church of Cuesta, New Mexico. But it's very small, really consider it. We call it a campus, but it's really functions more like a mission. Fellowship of the Parks is about, we average roughly 3,000 plus people on a weekend across all of our campuses. And again, my role as the senior pastor, particularly the founding senior pastor, is to continually cast the vision of our church, who we are, and to help architect the culture in our experiences, but also to, now that we're multi-site, it is to make sure in what we're trying to replicate, those constants versus what we're not. And sometimes that can be confusing. And sometimes it's managing the dynamic tension between the campus pastors and support central, if you would, those and understanding that tension, if that makes sense. It would to those that have been in a multi-site lab.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think your story is probably one that a lot of church leaders that are watching this video can relate to, in terms of especially those who are founding pastors of a church, starting small and trying to find their rhythm and gain some momentum as a church. And so talk about your model of MultiSite and the role that MultiSite has played in the growth of Fellowship of the Parks.
Well, when we started Fellowship of the Parks, really, MultiSite, it really was not much of a consideration. But we have been a church also that have struggled resource-wise as far as, never had any of those huge big givers, land given, that sort of thing. So we spent multiple years, really, goodness, the first half of our church's life in basically rented or leased facilities. So when we bought our first property, it was basically netted out to be about 7.9 acres. It is locked in, and we, in the process of building and trying to expand that, we knew that we would maximize out our initial location's property. And so when considering options, in the future, we thought, well, what would we do? At that time, some churches had relocated to larger campuses. I really didn't want to do that. What I saw in the trends, particularly like even with Walmart, they developed their concept of the neighborhood store. And I thought, instead of becoming just another huge regional church, why not increase involvement, volunteerism, participation by creating maybe smaller sites in different neighborhoods, because ultimately our original campus was going to be a neighborhood church, just because of where it's located. So we started, and really it grew out of just trying to experiment. And so I actually interned at a church for a guy who specifically I reported to the minister of evangelism. His name's Charles Thornton, and he was at the First Baptist Church of Euless for like 24, 26 years. And Charles taught me a lot. We have a great relationship. And so we were doing 5 services here at our Keller campus, and I brought him over actually just part-time as a teaching pastor. We started and thought, I introduced the concept of MultiSite. He wasn't sure, as we continued in the relationship, he came to a point where he was ready, and we basically wanted to leverage not just our existing campus, but also really influence. His home was in Grapevine. And I said, well, let's figure out MultiSite. And because I trust Charles, had, 20-year relationship plus with him, I said, let's use you as the guinea pig and try to figure this out. So we began our first experience. We took a team up to Seattle at Mars Hill, one of the first MultiSite conferences that the Leadership Network did. And we learned from that, came back, and started. And so that campus, huge learning curve, but I've got a highly gifted, able, competent campus pastor that can make things work there. That campus is 80% live teaching, 20% video that keeps us together. Like I said, he was a teaching pastor here. He spoke at least once a month. We do the same messages. What we do across campuses, the worship's tied together. Not only the message, but the music at present is tied together. Children's ministry and student ministry and life groups. Those are the primary things that we want to replicate. Our second campus, we kind of took from the experience we learned with, I say our second campus, actually our third campus would be Hazlitt. We basically did that with what we learned, and also planned for that to be video from the beginning. So it's 80% video, which I'm on video there, but the campus pastor speaks 20% of the time. What we found is and this is just as a matter of succession, there is a balance there where the campus pastor has exposure. So something happens to the campus pastor, they know the senior pastor who's been here the longest is there, and hopefully that provides stability. But also if something happens to me, then they do have some teaching experience from the campus pastor, but it's not so much that it takes away from his primary focus and role of connecting people, developing relationships, recruiting leaders, doing the things that really sometimes teaching in preparation for that take you away from. And it's kind of my philosophy is really the teaching side is a privilege. It's icing on the cake, but really the growth comes from the relational development and just intentional strategic relationships that campus pastors have to make. So we have both of those models. The site we do out in New Mexico is probably 95% video, and it's replicated on a much smaller scale out there. Okay, so did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great.
It's varied. So our sites are different, but the big thing is you're going to get the same message and you're going to get the same basic cultural experience that is very hospitable, casual in nature, not religious, and hopefully is going to appeal to really the majority of non-church people in that community.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Well, as you guys have continued to grow and develop these campuses and your multi-site strategy as a whole, what are some of the key steps, the key learnings that have come over the last few years?
For us, it is you've got to have good leadership and good direction, and that happens at both levels. It has to happen on developing that multi-site team, what we call our management team or support central. You really have to understand that group, what the roles are for that management team in dealing with the campus pastor and their staff. So you have to clarify those, and that can be a learning and an evolving process. I think we stay pretty fluid, but we keep our finger on the pulse of things and try to respond sooner than later. So, man, I would say it's just keeping the main things the main thing, letting the campuses be creative, and those campus pastors, them being champions for the campus, but also mapping it up in that system that is tried and true. I mean, that's why you do multi-site, because you found something that works, and to take from that the key transferable principles. That's what you want to execute and replicate. And it's just continually casting that vision. Now, I can tell you a whole lot of things that we did that was wrong, that I would never do. The way I introduced video teaching in our main campus, and by the way, it's terrible language, our original campus, that was a big mistake. And I decided to do basically half of the sermon live and half the sermon on video, which we use the full body shot. So I did a transition with myself. We were trying to sell what we're doing at our Hazlitt campus. And, I said, hey, what do you think? I'm thinking this is cool, great technology, advance the kingdom. Everybody's going to jump on board. And our people basically thought they were voting as to whether or not they wanted live Doug or digital Doug. And so there was a we would never do that again, because that set up, we just cast that wrong. So a lot of times it's timing, the way you introduce it. You really have to think through. And I'll tell you, for us, that's been the key thing, managing that relationship, the dynamic tension for the campus to be what it needs to be, contextualized in the community, but also maintaining those values of basically the original church and the leadership structure. Another thing for us to help, our campuses they've become very solid. The three in the Metroplex. And I think that also has something to do for us because we're more suburban. Those campuses are more suburban in nature. I think for us, it's us investing in the assets to create something that is perceived to be stable and long-term in the community has been very advantageous to basically establish campuses of 500 people, and that would be true of our Grapevine and Hazlitt campus. But we have a facility and we've invested in it, and it's becomes an asset. I would say too, this just for pastors and maybe for executive teams, that expansion, part of what allows us to expand the way we have is developing the assets and then, of course, leveraging those assets to be able to do more campuses. That's the value there from a business perspective, same reason you would do franchising. So we apply some of those same business principles, which I think is probably, you can learn as much or sometimes more from the business community maybe than you can the church world in trying to manage those. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I know from other visits with you guys and your team that you guys have really paid a lot of attention to some key measurements and some things that have caused you to either accelerate some things or take step off the gas a little bit. And so talk about those things that you're measuring, what success looks like for you guys and your model of MultiSide.
Okay, well, the clear win at Fellowship of the Parks, it's changed lives. So we talk about life change all the time. For us, that's measured in baptisms. We use that. I know people have different feelings on that, but for us, it is the profession of faith, and it's the beginning of a changed life. Someone's committed to Christ, and they've made that choice on their own. So baptisms are very important to us. We measure that. We measure attendance. Of course, we measure giving. We apply percentage ratios that we impose in different areas of our budget, such as what we're spending in facilities. We don't spend more than 50% of budget on personnel. We're continually looking at that number and really a host of numbers, metrics, if you will, to determine how well we're doing. So we want to know how campus is doing from the perspective, are they reaching people? We want to know, are they assimilating people? So our new member class, we're concerned about how many people are coming to that and how many people are actually joining. And then we do life groups based on semesters. So we know at the beginning of a semester, we push that across the board, and a lot of times our life groups are lined up in a semester, at least for the first part. So we're measuring those numbers, and we want to see growth in every area. And if we don't, then we make adjustments. I'll tell you, one we're making right now is we changed the format of the way we were doing our basically new member class, or commonly we used to call it 101, which many churches do. Well, the way we changed the format, we're getting higher percentages of people going through the class, joining, make a commitment to the church. And that involves other commitments as well that are attached to that. So we measure that. But in the format, we recognize that our original campus, we've not had as many people go through the class. So now since we looked at those numbers and figure out we've got to do something here before summer to get more people committed to membership, and we do have a formal membership, we're going to change that, do it right after a service in May, and kind of make that a prospective member party, and basically do the membership class right after the last service, so we can get more people and hopefully lock in commitments before. So all that's measured, but if you measure it, if you're looking at the numbers, you got to know what to do with it next. You got to, if you're down somewhere, you got to make those changes. You better have a strategy to try to fix it or get those numbers back up, or make a call as to whether or not you're going to continue to do something that's not working, or kill it, or whatever. So and I'll tell you, we measure, it's sort of an intangible. We do connection cards every weekend. And so really part of the win for us is at the end of a service, we have everybody each week do connection cards. We continually want to make those things easier for people and be more motivated for them to fill out at some level, because on that we ask them to evaluate, which seems it's not the tail wagging the dog, but we do want to know, okay, what's your overall experience, 1 to 5, the message, the music, and just your overall experience. We want to know, so we get immediate feedback from those connection cards, and those are entered in. And so we evaluate those. We look at those just to see any trends, and just see how the culture is doing. Plus, we do self-addressed, stamped feedback cards to guests as well. So those, we find trends. If something's off, that helps us be alerted to making it better. And of course, there's tons of ways you can evaluate that. You do consider the source on some of those things. So I don't know if that is helpful or not. Probably not too different than what other churches measure, but the key thing with us is we're gonna act on the numbers to make necessary changes to get the trend going in a growth direction. That makes.
Yep. No, that's good. And I think it's helpful to hear how other churches are approaching, the feedback loops, the ways that you're getting feedback from people, and some of the things, adjustments that you're making based on things that you're learning and hearing from those numbers. You had mentioned a couple other things earlier, but if you were speaking to leaders that were considering multi-site or that have just started a multi-site journey, any other input that you would give to those leaders?
The big thing would be, count the cost and be committed to it, because it literally will change everything, especially if you're going to go beyond one site, and really, I know the big number is 4. Once you get truly 4 sites, it becomes easier to expand, but it really practically it changes everything. So the constant question that we ask is, all right, are you willing to pare down ministries? Are you really willing to focus on the things that that you can replicate and make scalable in any environment? So we've had to look at a lot of things and say, you know what, at particularly our original campus, that's a great ministry. And maybe if that starts at another campus, not from staff, but from within, and they want to do that and contextualize something at their campus, that's okay, but that's not going to be the main thing we're driving. And if it's not scalable, if we cannot reproduce it, it is not a main thing. We don't need to focus on it. Some things we need to let die a natural death. Other things we intentionally need to kill so that other campuses don't think that they are, proverbially the redheaded stepchild because they don't have, these ministries like this other campus. I made the mistake earlier. I said our main campus. Changing that language. Your language is huge. But man, the way you look and address everything, the way your staff thinks, and by the way, we don't have just a pure management team. We have some we try to maximize our personnel. So, people may wear multi-hats, but, understanding the importance of that central team too and creating that within, even if people are overlapping, is important so you have a holistic look at things, but also are valuing what the campus pastors are championing and really just trying to get that, both a synthesis of those things and to synergize on the main things so the campus can move forward and you can really fulfill the vision God's given you.
I realize I'm putting you on the spot with this one, but is there something that was particularly painful that you guys had to kill because of your commitment to MultiSite?
Man, we have killed a number of things. For example, women's ministry, for example, is not something that we do across campuses. I mean, that was such a driver in so many churches, and it was, in ours. And, but men's ministry, same deal. We let that function as a group and spring up from within. So one women's ministry, it really is going to be in the form of a life group, which is what we look at multiplying across campuses. And if a campus wants to start a men's ministry, that's fine so long as it's not staff oriented. But we're not, we really don't care. I mean, if the women want to get together and do something, the men want to get together, we're not driving it. And that's where we're not announcing 100 things in a service. Each campus, by the way, has their own. We do a worship program shell that's the same, standard across all campuses. But there's an announcement insert that is specific to the campus. So men's ministry, women's ministry, sports ministry, we're coming up on the National Day of Prayer. This was just something that's not our focus. Is anything wrong with it? No, but we incorporate prayer into whatever we do. So, we used to do like a prayer event at our Keller campus. I said, hey guys, no, we're not mandating that because that's not the main thing. So, there's constantly a little stuff that you find pop up that it'll be a challenge to that. And you have to ask the question, there's nothing wrong with these events, nothing bad about it, but if it's not the main thing, it's draining resources and time and volunteers and everything away from what you're really trying to accomplish. So you've got to be prepared to do that. And even as a pastor, give up some pet projects, if you will.
Yeah. Well, Doug, as you look toward the future of Fellowship of the Parks, what are some things that you're hopeful for that aren't yet for you guys?
Well, we want to keep doing sites. We are in a period where we just this past year we had 2 overlapping large building projects. And so we basically are trying to breathe a little bit and basically grow into some of the space that we created. By the end of this year, we're going to do another campaign, and our goal will be to begin the formulation of 2 more sites, and those will be suburban type sites. We have internally created 3 different site models. We've experimented on some of those. They have not all worked. We've tried a neighborhood church concept. We've done we'll still do an Easter service at a pub here in the mid-cities area. But we tried to use that as a model to start and build community. It really didn't work. It was a great event, but it really didn't, so we will continue to try to experiment, but what we feel good about that has worked in the past, we'll try to do 2 of those, for lack of a better phrase, suburban type campuses here at the end of this year. And really my goal throughout the Metroplex, I've said, really since we started, we would like to see Fellowship of the Parks campus in every school district in the Metroplex, and particularly in those areas that are growing. I used to say we're going to do some transitional campuses or maybe bilingual, but we've been addressing that more through Spanish translation, as a part of the service with listening devices. So we continually shift and figuring out the strategy as we go. But Fellowship of the Parks, we are committed to grow, and we want to reach people. But Tim, if nobody hears anything else, my personal belief in what drives us is that really personal growth, called discipleship, is a byproduct of being engaged in the Great Commission, in reaching people, the same way we saw Paul did in Acts, and really the way we saw Jesus did with everyday people, and meet them where they are. So my hope and prayer is that as we expand, that discipleship or that concept will move from being something consumeristic, you grow because I get more, intellectual truth or nuggets from scripture, from, some form of, glossed up preaching, you know what I'm saying? Or, it's all about the emotional experience that I feel, from a worship service. Really, most people are saying, well, that's about what I get out of it. That keeps me growing. And a lot of times it becomes an end in and of itself. We want everybody at Fellowship of the Parks to know and believe that following Jesus means I'm engaged with him on mission. I'm even willing to defer my preferences, music, whatever, so that I can be a part of a place where an environment is created where I can invite my friends, no matter who they are, where they come from. And as a result, by the way, we use partyatmychurch.com. It's kind of our narrative for what we believe. We want to create that party that people can come to and see their lives changed.
That's good, Doug. Let's focus for a minute on your development and maybe the development of your team. Are there some books, some resources, some events that you've been to that you feel have been particularly helpful, informative for you?
Oh yeah, man. For me personally, one of the best things that I ever did, and really my introduction to Leadership Network was, and I'm really not just giving you a plug because you are a Leadership Network, but for me, being a part of the senior pastor groups, I've been a part of 2 of those. For me to be able to meet with peers, guys that are going through the same thing, maybe in different parts of the country, in which we set the agenda. There's no staff members there to protect the environment, to be able to deal with some of those real life things and struggles and even maybe fears about, so what if we go to MultiSide? What about this? To get those questions answered and just to find identification has been huge for me, because those meetings lead to offline conversations and, trips and things where you really get the nuts and bolts of what you need. Again, I mentioned earlier for us, the Multisite, what really, gave us the commitment and the knowledge to go ahead with our first Multisite was a leadership network. It's the first book you guys did on MultiSide. We went to that conference, and then so we followed that up. We've been involved in subsequent Multisite groups. One of the last ones was with you on the whole Support Central and figuring out how that works. The great thing about that is we all don't agree necessarily on like what works at one, but we take best practices and sometimes it's evolving. So it's good to have the input there. And we've also, our other staff have been involved in leadership network groups. I also personally use a consultant, and that's helped me a lot to have someone to look with fresh eyes at what we're doing, our numbers, very systematically, strategically at what we're doing. So that's it, and exposing our guys to and probably the best thing is hiring from within, because not just hiring people from the church world. A lot of times you don't have to cut through a lot of the baggage, so that's helped us because people are already familiar with our culture and know the values. So for us, the challenge is continually trying to develop and develop them in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard to figure out avenues for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what question haven't I asked you, Doug? What's something that you would like to speak to that I've missed?
I don't know. I would tell you this to maybe just practically from a nuts and bolts perspective. I think the best way to understand the way we work, maybe my role in the shifting role of a senior pastor, is you've got to continually empower and delegate and be willing. The only thing you want to really micromanage is the vision, but the execution of that, you got to empower people and let them do what they do. I know for me, it was a learning process. I basically used two people as executive pastors, one over operations and one over ministries. For me, one of the best things that I did, I have good relationships with them, is I go to a meeting on Monday morning, and that's my first meeting. I'm able to air everything out, get it clear from them. And then the next meeting we have is our management team or central support, basically. And in that meeting, I'm usually just there for the good story of the week that kind of encourages everybody. And if I don't leave that meeting, I can tend to dominate or be tempted to get my hands into something that I really need to let my guys do their job. And because they're very confident and they do a great job. And so in order to expand, a leader has to kind of gravitate upwards. And the only way I know to explain how to do that is by the meeting structure. I have that early morning meeting. I'm there for the first of the management team meeting. I meet with all of our staff once a month, but this is a high level where we're going, and I do something for them just devotionally, kind of once a month to motivate them. And then I meet with campus, our local campus pastors for breakfast on Tuesday morning. But those are the commitment and the level of meetings I have. The rest of it, those guys have to go to the people they report to and follow the structures we have in place. So, the bigger any church gets, you have to do that. But particularly with MultiSite, as the senior leader, you've got to be willing to trust, empower, and risk, so that even if something blows up, you'll fix it on the back end, but you got to let those things go a little bit in order to grow.
Well, before we wrap up, anything else that you want to promote or plug today?
Man, I would just say Truly, Leadership Network is the best. It's the best organization that I've ever been involved in, and so much so. I mean, we've sent our staff to different groups and so forth, and I mean, I would really recommend it. And I don't say this lightly, but for me, probably the senior pastor group was probably a ministry saver, because I've been in it for a long time. It's been a long, hard road. And even though you have friends in ministry, a lot of times the paths, the churches are different. And for me, that first meeting, the first senior pastor group I went to, it was a great experience for me. And it was discouraging, but in an encouraging way. I really realized how unhealthy I was. The time that I was spending, my whole life had been so Fellowship of the Park's based for so long. I just kind of worked myself into just a workaholism, that was really long-term defeating versus the short-term gains that I thought that I would be winning. And so it was that experience that really, I think, led me to a healthier path that has helped enable our growth and helped me to see things, from different perspectives that help us adapt in such a fluid world. So, man, I'm all for most anything Leadership Network does, and I'm going to be involved where it fits us, at the present time. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, that's good, Doug. Thank you for sharing that. Not just because it was about Leadership Network, but because as we found, there are a lot of guys who are out there in ministry that are lonely. Even though they're surrounded by a lot of people, and they're in a situation where they need that kind of camaraderie and those relationships. And so we're grateful to be able to facilitate you finding that, and I pray that many others will as well. But I just want to thank you again for your time this morning, spending some time with us and investing in those that are listening to this video. And for those that are watching, we want to, if you want any more information about MultiSite or some of the things that are going on in that arena, feel free to email me at tim.nations@leadnet.org. One of our goals as an organization is to foster innovation movements that activate the church to greater impact. And so my challenge to you would be, as we sign off, is to take these ideas and find ways to leverage them for greater impact for the kingdom. Thanks so much.